Waves crashed against the shoreline as a lone figure stepped into the cold dawn, moving toward a course built to break spirits long before it tested strength. Boots sank into the wet sand, and the air carried the uneasy quiet of people waiting for someone to fail. The moment was heavier than the gear strapped across tired shoulders, yet the steps never faltered. Each obstacle loomed like a reminder of every voice that insisted this path was forbidden. But the silence from the watching crowd revealed something deeper than doubt. It held a tension that whispered of rules challenged and expectations shaken. And as the first whistle sliced through the morning air, the world felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The morning grew harsher as the course pushed bodies and minds past the point of comfort, stripping away anything that wasn't pure determination. Sand clung to every surface, turning simple movements into battles of will. Yet one figure pressed on with a quiet steadiness that unsettled those expecting collapse. Whispers faded as endurance replaced doubt, and something unspoken began shifting in the air. The old belief that this place was reserved for a select few trembled, not because rules changed, but because someone refused to be shaped by them. Even the instructors sensed the shift, watching more closely now, waiting to see whether this moment would fracture or redefine the day. Pain spread through limbs that had long surpassed their usual limits, turning every step into a test of purpose rather than strength. The course demanded submission, yet the determined figure at its center continued moving with a stubborn rhythm that refused to give way. Around her, the others breathed hard, each fighting their own battles, but something about her persistence carried a different weight. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't desperation. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had heard every reason to quit and chose to keep going anyway. The instructors exchanged small, knowing glances, aware that moments like this could not be taught. The wind shifted again as the group approached the final stretch of the morning grind, a section designed to wear down even the strongest. Though exhaustion clung to every trainee, one figure still moved with a measured focus, each breath directed toward the next task. Observers along the sideline murmured quietly, sensing the unraveling of a belief they'd held for years. This wasn't a scene of defiance, but of quiet transformation, a demonstration that the limits people spoke of existed only where courage failed. And today, courage was winning. As the final whistle echoed across the shoreline, the course grew silent, except for the labored breathing of those who had given everything to the morning. But silence carried more than exhaustion. It held the weight of realization, a collective awareness that something unexpected had taken place. Eyes drifted toward the figure who still stood upright, battered but unbroken, and whispers of doubt dissolved into a quiet respect no one had prepared to give. In that still moment, expectations bent, not through force, but through undeniable presence. And the day ended with the unspoken truth that the story had only just begun. The afternoon brought a harsher kind of quiet, the kind that settled into the bones and reminded everyone that this place cared little for hope or pride. The ocean winds had grown sharper, carrying flecks of salt that stung tired skin, yet the day pressed on without mercy. A new set of challenges waited ahead, darker, heavier, designed to peel away what remained of comfort. But something subtle had shifted. Those who once watched with doubt now watched with curiosity, sensing that the story unfolding before them was unlike any they had seen. The course did not soften, but the atmosphere changed as perseverance carved its own space, demanding recognition without ever asking for it. The weighted march stretched across uneven ground, turning each step into a slow negotiation between pain and purpose. Dust rose from boots that had already traveled farther than anyone cared to admit, filling the air with the dry taste of strain. Yet, one figure kept a pace that ignored exhaustion, moving as though the miles behind her had been mere warm-up. Others glanced sideways, their earlier skepticism folding into a quiet acceptance that effort alone could not explain. This wasn't just endurance. It was resolve shaped by years of being told to stay outside the line she now walked straight through. The course narrowed into a steep stretch carved with jagged rocks, a place known for breaking momentum and bruising morale. Voices that once echoed across the training ground quieted as every trainee leaned into the climb. But among the scattered breaths was a rhythm that refused to falter. Each movement pressed forward with a purpose that could not be mistaken for luck or stubbornness. Even the instructors noticed, exchanging brief glances that hinted at a shift they could not deny. The climb was meant to separate those who merely wanted the title from those who were willing to bleed for it. And today, the difference was unmistakable. As the sun dipped lower, the trainees approached the cold water test, a challenge feared not for its difficulty, but for the way it stripped warmth, strength, and clarity all at once. The water churned with dark swells, its surface betraying nothing of the shock waiting just beneath. When the signal came, bodies braced for impact, but only one moved without hesitation, diving into the icy depths with a conviction that silenced the murmurs nearby. For a moment, all that could be heard was the crash of distant waves and the quiet awe of those witnessing a barrier they once thought unbreakable being crossed without pause. By the time the evening horn sounded, the horizon glowed with fading orange light, and the cold began to settle into every exhausted limb. Yet the real shift came not from the weather, but from the way eyes turned toward the figure still standing tall at the end of the shoreline. What began as disbelief had grown into a quiet collective realization that the standards of the day had been met with something rare. Respect replaced doubt, even among those who would never admit it aloud. And as the wind swept across the training grounds, the moment left a promise hanging in the air. This was only the beginning of a change no one had expected to witness. Night settled over the training grounds with a heaviness that pushed every trainee toward the edge of their endurance. Darkness erased the landmarks they had relied on, turning familiar paths into silent threats. The air carried a cool bite, the kind that reminded each person how alone they could feel even among a crowd. Yet in the quiet, one figure moved with a steadiness that defied the uncertainty around them. The challenge ahead was not about strength or speed, it was about holding on to purpose when visibility vanished and doubt circled like a persistent storm. And as the night deepened, the tension in the air hinted that limits were about to be tested in ways daylight had not dared. The navigation test pushed every trainee into isolation, forcing them to trust instinct over comfort. The terrain twisted unpredictably, swallowing sound and distorting direction. Hours passed, with only the crunch of leaves and the distant echo of footsteps to break the quiet. But through the stillness came a rhythm that did not waver, a determination to move forward, even when the path felt invisible. The test had always been designed to expose uncertainty, yet something in the measured pace of one figure suggested an inner resolve shaped long before tonight's challenge. The darkness had come to intimidate, but instead it revealed a strength no one could overlook. Fatigue settled deeper as the night stretched on, tugging heavily at every movement. The test grew harsher, pushing bodies toward collapse and minds toward doubt. Yet a quiet persistence carried one figure through obstacles that blurred in the shadows. Sharp branches scraped clothing, hidden roots caught boots, and cold air stung every breath. Still, there was no hesitation, only steady progress through the shifting dark. Instructors watching from hidden vantage points exchanged subtle looks, recognizing that something rare was unfolding. This wasn't endurance for its own sake. It was purpose carved into every silent step. The night navigation course ended near the shoreline, where waves rolled in with a slow, rhythmic pull that mirrored the exhaustion in every trainee. Most arrived with heavy steps, their strength drained by the long hours of darkness. But among them approached a figure whose pace remained steady, not fast, but unwavering. The test had demanded clarity when there was none to be found, yet determination proved more reliable than sight. As the group assembled, the weight of the moment settled quietly, and those who had doubted earlier now watched with a new understanding. Some challenges revealed more than skill. They revealed truth. As dawn crept toward the horizon, the final evaluation of the night drew to a close. The sky slowly shifted from black to deep blue, casting faint light across exhausted faces. In the quiet moments before the next phase began, tension hung between expectation and recognition. One figure stood at the center of that silence, not because of loud achievement, but because of consistent, unwavering endurance that no one could dismiss. The coming day promised more trials, but the night had already revealed a truth impossible to ignore. Strength had many forms, and this one was rewriting the rules in real time. Morning returned with a thin, unforgiving light that exposed every bruise, cut, and doubt carried from the night before. The new phase was a test of coordination under pressure, demanding calm in a world where seconds decided success. The course stretched wide and complex, filled with tasks meant to overwhelm those who relied on instinct instead of clarity. Yet one figure moved forward with a steady resolve, refusing to let fatigue distort focus. The tension in the air grew as each trainee confronted a challenge that pushed past physical strain and deep into the mind. It was a battle against hesitation, and hesitation had no place here. By the time the first test began, the difference between those who merely hoped to continue and those determined to endure had never been clearer. The next challenge required teamwork under pressure, a task that revealed fractures long before it built trust. Instructions rang out sharply, echoing across the grounds as each group scrambled to find a rhythm that didn't collapse under stress. Uncertainty flickered among those who were used to relying on their own strength, but one figure stepped into the chaos with calm direction. Pressure mounted as voices clashed and time slipped away, yet the steady presence at the center of the effort began to shift the tone. What once felt frantic slowly became controlled, not because the challenge softened, but because determination steadied what fear tried to unravel. As the final seconds ticked down, a quiet confidence settled over the group, surprising even those who doubted it could be found. Fatigue caught up quickly as the day intensified, turning simple tasks into gauntlets that tested more than muscle or endurance. Each movement demanded precision, yet exhaustion blurred the edges of clarity. Still, one figure pushed ahead with a quiet resilience that made others straighten their posture and match the pace. The instructors watched closely, recognizing the difference between physical strength and mental discipline. Moments like these defined the future far more than raw ability ever could. The course wasn't designed to reward perfection. It was built to expose character. And today, character was beginning to take shape in ways no one expected when the training first began. The next test demanded absolute calm in an environment designed to tear it away. The moment began with controlled breathing, but tension rose quickly as noise, movement, and pressure converged all at once. Each trainee faced the same storm, yet reactions varied wildly. Some faltered under the weight of expectation, while others forced their way through with sheer determination. One figure, however, approached the moment with a steady calm that seemed to steady those nearby. The chaos didn't shrink, but the response to it shifted, transforming fear into focus. That quiet influence carried farther than any shouted command ever could. The final challenge of the day arrived with fading sunlight stretching long shadows across the ground. Exhaustion weighed heavily on every step, but the air carried something else: anticipation. The instructors gathered quietly, aware that this moment would reveal more than the entire day combined. Every trainee stood ready, though many trembled beneath the surface. One figure held stillness differently, not as a mask but as a choice. When the signal finally sounded, the determination that had carried through long nights and brutal mornings surged again. The test ended in silence, but the silence felt changed, as if everyone present sensed the beginning of a shift too important to ignore. A cold wind swept across the training grounds as the next phase began, the kind that slipped through layers of clothing and settled deep in the bones. Today's challenge was meant to break confidence in ways the earlier tests hadn't. It demanded judgment under pressure, the kind that left no room for hesitation. Each trainee felt the weight of the moment, but one figure stepped forward with a calm that pushed back against the growing uncertainty around them. The instructors watched closely, not for perfection but for clarity, knowing that leadership often revealed itself in the smallest choices. As the first signal sounded, tension rippled through the group like a silent warning that the day would not forgive mistakes. The scenario test began with sharp commands and shifting conditions, forcing every mind into rapid calculation. Confusion spread quickly among those who relied too heavily on instinct, turning confidence into scattered uncertainty. Yet, one figure moved with steady intention, adjusting to each new instruction with quiet precision. The test was never about memorization. It was about adapting when the familiar suddenly changed. As the minutes stretched on, frustration grew among many, but determination held firm in one corner of the field. The instructors noticed, exchanging subtle nods that acknowledged something rare unfolding amid the chaos. The next stage pushed the group into a grueling endurance circuit designed to drain whatever energy remained. Each task transitioned into the next without pause, leaving little time for breath or thought. Bodies moved out of habit, minds fought to stay clear, and the ground felt heavier with every step. But one figure maintained a rhythm that refused to collapse, driving forward even as exhaustion carved deep lines into the day. Others caught glimpses of this resolve and found themselves pushing harder, unwilling to fall behind. In a place built to expose weakness, quiet perseverance carried its own gravity. The mental challenge arrived unexpectedly, delivered in clipped instructions that offered no comfort and even less clarity. Trainees gathered around the task, their tired minds struggling to keep pace with the shifting requirements. Some grew frustrated, others stalled, but one figure approached the moment with quiet patience. Bit by bit, the scattered pieces began to align, forming a solution that seemed impossible minutes before. The test was meant to overwhelm, yet determination created a path through the confusion. Observers watched closely, understanding that moments like this defined more than skill. They revealed a kind of steadiness no storm could shake. As sunset crept across the horizon, the final exam of the day brought everyone to the shoreline once more. The course ahead was long, unforgiving, and shaped by years of tradition meant to decide who continued and who fell away. Every trainee braced themselves, hearts pounding with the weight of what came next. When the signal finally broke the silence, one figure surged forward, with a resolve sharpened by everything endured so far. The moment carried a quiet electricity, the sense that something larger than the test itself was unfolding. By the time the final bell sounded, the watching eyes held a new understanding, one shaped not by surprise but by undeniable recognition. Before sunrise, the silence carried a different weight, one shaped by anticipation rather than exhaustion. Today marked a turning point, a phase designed to reveal who had truly grown through the hardships and who had merely survived them. The air felt colder than usual, as though the world itself braced for what was coming. Each trainee prepared in their own way, but one figure stood with a composure that steadied even the most anxious hearts around them. The instructors noticed the shift, watching more closely now, aware that this stage would shape the final outcome. As the horizon brightened, a quiet electricity swept across the grounds, promising that nothing about the day would be ordinary. The first challenge erupted into motion with an intensity that felt sudden, though everyone had known it was coming. The task demanded fast thinking under pressure, forcing each trainee into a world where hesitation carried real consequences. Shouts and commands mixed with the sharp rhythm of movement, and confusion spread quickly among those who tried to force control instead of adapting. Yet, amid the noise, one figure navigated the chaos with a calm that cut through the disorder. Each decision felt deliberate, shaped not by fear but by clarity earned through struggle. It was a moment that made even the hardened instructors pause. Midday brought the endurance gauntlet, an unbroken chain of obstacles meant to drain every reserve left in the body. Heat pressed down like a weight, turning breath into a struggle and each step into a battle of will. Many faltered, their strength slipping beneath the relentless pace. But in the middle of the course moved a figure who refused to yield, pushing forward with a steadiness that drew the eyes of everyone watching. The instructors exchanged quiet looks, aware of the significance unfolding. This wasn't survival. It was a demonstration of determination that reshaped expectations with every passing moment. The psychological test arrived without warning, appearing in the form of quick instructions that forced the mind to accelerate when the body wanted only to rest. The complexity of the task sent ripples of frustration through the group, leaving many unsure where to begin. But one figure approached the challenge with quiet resolve, sorting through the confusion piece by piece. Time seemed to slow as scattered details formed a pattern, transforming frustration into focus. Observers watched with an attention sharpened by curiosity, recognizing the strength that emerged not through force, but through calm understanding. As evening approached, the sky darkened into soft hues of blue and gold, casting long shadows across the training grounds. The final challenge of the day was designed to test everything: endurance, judgment, and the ability to stay composed under mounting pressure. Each trainee stepped forward with the weight of the journey behind them, but only one carried a quiet certainty that drew every gaze. When the signal sounded, movement burst across the field, but the silence that followed held the moment far more tightly. By the end, what had once been doubt transformed into something deeper: recognition. And for the first time, it felt like the entire course understood what was unfolding. The final day arrived with an uneasy calm, the kind that settled deep into the ground and echoed through every quiet breath. The weeks of hardship had carved strength and doubt in equal measure, leaving each trainee to face the last test with whatever resolve remained. The air held the weight of unspoken expectations, a reminder that everything done until now meant nothing without what came next. The challenge ahead was steep, unforgiving, and shaped by tradition older than any of them. Yet one figure stepped forward with a quiet steadiness that shifted the atmosphere, turning the moment from fear into possibility. The final trial would not bend for anyone, but the silence suggested that today might break history instead. The last course erupted in a blur of movement, each obstacle demanding precision and resilience sharpened by every hardship endured. Dust kicked up beneath fast steps, ropes strained under weight, and the sharp sting of exhaustion pressed hard against every breath. Some trainees faltered, their strength slipping away in the final stretch. But one figure moved with a pace that defied fatigue, each movement driven by something deeper than training. Observers watched with a mix of disbelief and understanding, sensing that this moment carried a weight far heavier than the test itself. The course didn't soften, but something in the air shifted as determination carved a path no doubt could block. The final climb towered above the grounds, its height a reminder of every failure it had witnessed. Wind pressed hard against the structure, carrying whispers of anxiety from those watching below. One figure approached the ascent with steady resolve, gripping each hold with the rhythm of someone who refused to let the moment slip away. Every pull upward drew new attention, turning disbelief into awe as the figure rose higher. By the halfway point, the training field had fallen silent. The climb was not just a challenge. It had become a declaration, one etched into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. When the final obstacle was cleared, the silence felt heavier than the shouts that usually followed. The trainees gathered, their breathing ragged, yet their eyes fixed on one figure who stood motionless, catching the last breath of the challenge. Instructors stepped forward slowly, their expressions softened by something rarely seen: respect without hesitation. The moment stretched, suspended in a quiet that carried every doubt, every struggle, every expectation shattered along the way. The journey had reshaped more than endurance. It had rewritten what was possible, and the people who once doubted now stood witness to a turning point far larger than themselves. As the ceremony began, the horizon dimmed into soft hues of gold and blue, casting a calm light over the formation. The final announcement carried through the still air, each word marking the end of a journey few had believed possible. When the figures in uniform shifted to attention, The quiet transformed into something powerful. A message spoken without sound. The weight of history settled gently, not as a burden, but as a victory claimed through unwavering resolve. And in that moment, the long road of doubt, struggle, and silent endurance finally revealed its purpose. The journey had ended, but what it changed would echo far beyond the training grounds.